feel really privileged to have served on the vestry nearly half of those 12 and a half years, about 6 years. So I've had an opportunity to really see Bruce in action and understand what a great resource he has been to our church. His presence, his knowledge, his experience, and personality, including at times a rather corny sense of humor, those of you who know Bruce well, have contributed to our parish greatly.
For you too.
One of Bruce's special talents could be observed when officiating at a memorial service. Bruce mentioned to me one day, while preparing for 2 memorial services in 3 days, plus preaching on Sunday, at the Sunday sermon that week, I felt like he needed a little condolence or a little shoulder to cry on a little bit. But it was funny, the way he responded to me. He said, really, he didn't view those services as a burden. He viewed them to be particularly fulfilling because the congregation was so open to the Word of God and God's gift of resurrection. You can feel his calming reassurance in those moments, those of you who have experienced that, not just in his words, but in his smile and his handshake. Among the areas of Bruce's influence at St. Mark's that I've been most appreciative of, though, is his stewardship education. My father had a lot to do with my formation in stewardship, but over the past 10 years or so, Bruce has been my mentor in being a good steward of God's gifts. He taught it, always with a strong and consistent message of giving, not to fund a budget, but giving in thanks to God and in recognition that all we have comes from Him. Bruce understands stewardship and not only teaches it and preaches it well, but lives it. In this and in so many other ways, I'll miss Bruce. On behalf of all the members of St. Mark's, Bruce, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to you for your wonderful ministry at St. Mark's. And congratulations for your well-deserved retirement. And let me be the first to toast our best wishes, and I didn't bring my wine up with me, so go ahead.
Still, I'll bring it up there.
And I'll give you a chance to get yours. Just a toast to Bruce, and best wishes for a wonderful and fulfilling experience wherever God leads you next.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
See? Someone else did it. Kind of
and at this time, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I had a chance to meet the Reverend David Bailey, who was ordained with Bruce at Christ Church Cathedral in Cincinnati on this very day in 2001. I enjoyed getting to meet David. I asked him if he stayed in touch with Bruce over the years, and he said, "Oh yes." And I said, "Well, that means you know all the dirt on St. Mark's." And he says, "More importantly, I know all the dirt on Bruce." And so, be forewarned, Bruce. But anyway, David, please join me.
I'm a little disappointed I don't see a fireplace here. Are we supposed to take our place? But that would probably be bad for the budget.
We have one downstairs.
Oh! The other thing is that I've been instructed that I should speak for at least 1 minute longer than the Reverend Dick Bernett. So if you time me, you'll know that you'll know when Dick's time is up. I love you guys. 12 and a half years ago, David Bailey, Sylvia Beckman Robbins Penniman, otherwise known as Becky, Alan Bruce Smith, did I get that right?
Yes.
And Mary Vidmar met together for the first time. We were on a retreat for our ordination to the diaconate. And that was the first time that we directly disobeyed the counsel of our superiors. Now, those of you who are ordained know that part of our ordination vows are that we will respect and be guided by the direction of our bishop and those put in authority over us. Fortunately, this was about 2 weeks before that happened. We had never really met all four of us together until that time. And the instructions we were given by the retreat master were, go back to your rooms and be silent for the rest of the evening. I confess, that didn't happen. It didn't even come close to happening. And after several hours of getting to know each other and having wonderful, lively conversations, I think we finally got around to saying Compline with the idea that at the end of Compline, we would be quiet. We said Compline and kept talking. And that was my introduction to Bruce Smith. We continued to do things that didn't exactly contradict what the diocese said we should do, but came pretty darn close. At our ordination to the priesthood, it's customary, at least I found in this diocese, that if you have multiple people being ordained to the priesthood, that the first person's ordained, all the priests come up and lay hands on them, and then they just kind of kneel there, and the second person, and so on and so forth. We decided to do it differently. So I was ordained, and then I got up and was part of the group that laid hands on Becky. And then Becky and I were part of the group that laid hands on Bruce. And then Becky and Bruce and I were part of the group that laid hands on Mary. And poor Mary, there was nobody else on the aisle, so she didn't get to participate in the laying on of hands until the next set of ordinations. We picked wonderful music for that ordination and were informed about a month later that that would never happen again. But we were able to take our, I won't say take control, that sounds bad. We were able to gain some influence on how we were ordained and the music that was used and some of the liturgy that was used. And I thank God that the four of us were able to stand, sit, and kneel together in that process. Bruce and I have spent probably most of the last 12 years having most of our interaction at various diocesan events. And there have been times when particularly touchy, delicate, prickly topics have come up. And we worked together. Our goal was that while we all had different opinions about different things, that we would find common ground and work together toward unity. And I really thank Bruce for that. Our names appear on a couple of resolutions that are buried someplace in the archives of the diocese. But we worked hard to gain consensus. It has been wonderful to know you for the last 12 and a half years. And Susan. Hi, Susan. And I thank God that even though you are retired, whatever that means for ordained ministry, that you're still going to be around. I hope to be able to see you at clergy gatherings and even at the occasional diocesan convention. So again, thank you for sharing ministry with me for the last 12 and a half years. And more than that, thank you for being my friend.
Thank you.
speaker is the Reverend Dick Bernett from Trinity Episcopal downtown on Capitol Square. Dick, you've been challenged, so.
Thank you, St. Mark's. Thank you, David. Thank you, Bruce and Susan. I am mindful that there will be many who will do as David has done and talk about personal experiences, words of gratitude, dare I say inspiration that Bruce and Susan together have brought into our lives. While I feel that I could offer some of those myself, I want to speak on a different topic tonight. I'd like to talk about Bruce Smith, Playboy.
Remember, Dick, I go last.
Bruce grew up, as did Susan as well, or at least spent time in her after college years in the communities in northern New Jersey, in some of the playgrounds of the corporate elite of New York City. So when I say Playboy, I'm not talking about a monthly magazine. I'm talking about having a good time. I think we know that Bruce is the kind of person who kind of has a sense of where the party is and what to do when you get there. Bruce has delighted tables and clergy conferences and AT&T seminars over the years. So when I say that Bruce Smith as Playboy is someone who plays for fun, I don't have to belabor that point. I do want to say, though, that Bruce is someone who can play fast, too. Now, I don't mean fast and loose in the euphemistic sense of someone who cheats you. Bruce would never cheat you. But Bruce is a quick guy. He's fun to sort of get into a little repartee with. He's fun to get a kind of running joke going on and on in your ministry. In fact, Bruce,
Oh, you thank God, David.
Bruce, I thank God daily for our ministry together. This awaits you. Bruce also plays fair. He's an ethical person. He's a fun person and he's a clever person, but he's also a deeply compassionate person. Bruce, I've only heard you preach once. It was at Dan Ames' funeral. I remember what you said. And I can say that I followed Jesus better for hearing that day. But let's remember this Playboy who plays fun and fast and fair also has some purpose to his play. Dare I coin a new phrase and suggest that along with your brilliant spouse and life partner, you two play forward. By that I mean you are not satisfied, the two of you are not satisfied to just hang out and spin wheels in one place. You've had a long ministry, an extraordinary gift, a long ministry as a second. That's remarkable. The only way a person can do that is as a true leader. Pay attention to this pastor in your midst. Pay attention to the kind of collegiality that was developed over the years with others not in this room and many of us here around this table and scattered around the room in the terms of the extraordinary lay leadership that I shared with Paul at dinner of this parish church. And believe me, coming from Trinity's rector, that's saying a lot, okay? You play forward, not for your own self-aggrandizement, but for the church and her witness to God's justice, God's peace, God's shalom. Susan and Bruce are one mighty good team. But Susan, you would be disappointed if I didn't bring a book up here, since I always covet your library. And while you're probably sad that I won't read the whole chapter, I'll share just a paragraph from the primary sources of liturgical theology, one of Bruce's favorites. Romano Guardini, one of the foundational thinkers of Vatican II, writing about 70 years ago, said, "Grave and earnest people who make the knowledge of truth their whole aim see moral problems in everything and seek for a definite purpose everywhere tend to experience a particular difficulty where the liturgy is concerned. They incline to regard it as being, to a certain extent, aimless, as superfluous pageantry of a needlessly complicated and artificial character. The liturgy tends to strike people of this turn of mind as, to use the words which are really most appropriate, trifling and theatrical." Guardini goes on to say the problem is people with this kind of orientation just can't play. We need more playboys and playgirls in the church today. We need to play more, not for our own amusement, but for Christ's sake. In the end, Guardini writes, in the end, eternal life will be its fulfillment. Will the people who do not understand the liturgy be pleased to find that the heavenly consummation is an eternal song of praise? Well, in that end, I planned to thank God again and have a dance with my friends Susan and Bruce.